All right.
Hello, I'm Debbie Ellickson, and I'm here for our movie talk. And we're here with Sean Dulaney, who is a comic book creator, and he has created a comic called 51 Delta, and among others. And he was at Comic-Con this last week, and I'm so anxious to hear what you thought of it, Sean.
Uh,
Give us kind of an overview of what. Have you been to many Comic Cons before?
this was my 10th. This was my
Wow.
10th.
So
I
you've got a
took
really good comparison.
good comparison. Yeah, my first one was in 2005, and I took a year off in 2010. But yeah, 10 years of doing the show, and this year was. A lot of people said going in this was going to be a strange year for Comic-Con, and I think that played out. But it was a good show, but it was a strange show.
How is it strange?
Um, well, I think this is the year, really and truly, that Comic Con took over San Diego. It's been slowly happening, but this year was the year that the carnival outside the event was as big as what was going on in the convention center. And this is something that has slowly been growing for about 3-4 years now. It started with Nerd HQ and Geek and Sundry taking over Jolt and Joe's Bar and Grill on 4th Street a few years back. Then for 2 years, Nerd HQ took over a section of Petco Park. And this year was probably its biggest year, but it was in a smaller venue. They took over the Children's Museum. And I think there were as many posts I saw online when I would get back to the hotel about things that were happening at Nerd HQ as there were things that happened in Hall H or Ballroom 20 or just on the convention floor itself. And the last few years, I think people had consciously avoided going on the show floor on Saturday because as the show began to sell out every day, you could not move, especially on a Saturday, because that's when everyone wanted to go. That was the day, especially before it started selling out, when people could still buy tickets at the door. Saturday was the day the quote-unquote civilians would come in from San Diego who were just kind of curious about this Comic-Con thing that comes to town every year. We want to see the people in the costumes, all that. Saturday was always this massive day where you were grateful if you had a booth to hide out in because you couldn't walk the aisles. The last few years, Saturday has been fairly calm, but this year, Saturday was like it was, say, in 2008, 2009, where you almost were tempted to go see a movie rather than try to fight your way through the crowds.
So what were the in your mind from the events that what's better, visiting the booth on the floor, the panels, the cosplay? What are some of the things that you like the best out of the show?
Well, for me, it's a little bit of everything. I've talked with people who say, "Oh, it's not about comics anymore," but Comic-Con is much like the old line about taking three blind men, putting them on either side of an elephant, and have them describe the elephant, and everyone will come up with a different description. Comic-Con is what you make it. If you want to focus on comics, you can do that. If you want to concentrate on movies and TV shows, you can do that. If you want to find some unusual new book that maybe your local comic shop doesn't carry, odds are you're going to find it at Comic-Con. But for myself, I enjoyed catching up with old friends, making some new friends at different fellow creators, and taking in some panels. It was some interesting ones this year. I got to sit in on the women creators of the 1940s. Trina Robbins, a comic historian, has released a new book called Babes in Arms, and it's the story of a lot of the women who worked on comic books during World War II. Much like in the factories and everywhere else, as the men went off to war, women were called upon to create art and stories for comics. But because back then no one signed their own work, whatever, they've gone unheralded for years, and she's done the research and basically told the story of some of these women. So that was interesting to sit in and watch. There were also a couple of other panels, one on increasing diversity in comics, which was very interesting to sit in on. And I'm trying to remember what else. I'm operating on about 2 hours sleep. I flew out of San Diego last night around 9 p.m. Pacific back to Illinois. So I'm a little spotty at times. But no, like I said, Comic-Con is what you make it. If you're there for toys, that's what the show can be. If you're there for comics, if you're there for movies, it all depends on what you're after.
And with regards to Comic-Con and its popularity, when you go back to 2005, was it just this little kind of gathering? Well, not little, but was it this gathering of people who were not necessarily mainstream yet? Because now, everywhere you turn, there's Batman, Superman. I mean, it's like it's not for kids. The entire adult world is saturated and embracing all things from Marvel to DC to and beyond. We're so in love with the superhero syndrome. What are your thoughts on that?
I think when I first went in 2005, that was the start of really when the growth period was kicking in for Comic-Con. I think, I'm not 100% sure what the numbers were, but I want to say it was like 75 to 85,000 people that year. And like I said, it was my first year. It was overwhelming, but it was still concentrated around the convention center. You still kind of had a little attitude from some of the wait staff and businesses in town going, oh God, the geeks are back. As opposed to how it is now, where the city has just embraced Comic-Con. There was a poll that came out, I want to say it came out Tuesday or Wednesday, where they polled the citizens of San Diego on what they would rather keep, Comic-Con or the Chargers, because they are trying to decide if they're going to expand the convention center or build a new stadium for the football team. And the city overwhelmingly chose Comic-Con.
Wow.
And that blew my mind, remembering what it was like in 2005. I mean, it wasn't they were openly hostile, but I think as the economy got shaky in the late 2000s, and a lot of companies cut back on sending people to major conventions, cut back on expense accounts, and all of these big ticket conventions where it wasn't near as many people, but the amount of money they would spend to pharmaceutical companies would spend to entertain doctors or things like that. When that got cut back, Comic-Con just kept growing. And it was Comic-Con is an event. People will save all year to go to Comic-Con. And you see that with the rates that the hotels charge, even when they go through the conventions, those hotel rates are anywhere from $230 a night to over $400. So, and like I said, that's the convention discount rate. So you can imagine what they're charging people who just show up or just make the reservations outside of the hotel lottery.
Right. Well, let's talk about some of the features and highlights that happened at this year's Comic-Con. Obviously, there's two things that come to mind. Obviously, Star Wars and the Batman versus Superman movies. What else comes to mind for you? I mean, obviously, those are huge.
Well, the Batman Superman are, of course, I kind of have a vested interest in because I live fairly close to Metropolis, Illinois. And I've gotten to know a lot of hardcore Superman fans who were, let's be honest, were disappointed in Man of Steel because they did not feel that that was their Superman. But at the same time, I'm seeing a lot of guarded optimism, especially after seeing the trailer. I mean, of course, people are always going to find fault with certain elements, but I think there is a level of excitement right now for that movie that wasn't there a week ago. People, after seeing the trailer, seeing the action, seeing a little more insight into the story, they're kind of getting more fired up and excited about what's going to happen.
Yeah, and some of those elements that they seem to be keeping in the ambiance of the movie is the Dark Knight aspect of it. They're not necessarily following the story, but they're keeping some of that look from those movies.
Right. I think also with Star Wars, I had no idea what those fireworks were when I posted those pictures. But I was walking from having dinner over to the Hyatt Hotel just to meet some friends, and all of a sudden I'm hearing explosions, and what is that? Turns out that was the fireworks show that was part of the Star Wars presentation. After they had their panel, they invited all 6,500 people in Hall H out to a band shell. So the San Diego Symphony would be playing the classic Star Wars theme for the fireworks show.
Wow.
And which was amazing. And once in a lifetime experience, because also out there you had Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher and members of the new cast. And I think everyone was excited about it except Kevin Smith, who had the next panel after Star Wars. And when he came out on stage, I think there was maybe 20 people left.
That's a tough act to follow.
Yeah, it's like it's bad enough you had to follow Star Wars in Hall H.
That's your worst nightmare.
When J.J. Abrams says, "Hey, all of you, we're going for gelato," or something like that. that's the equivalent. It's like, okay, everybody, we're going for ice cream. You can stick around or you can go with us. We're going with Han Solo. But no, those were probably two of the big social media moments and just major moments of the weekend. I think the reaction to the Suicide Squad trailer, that's been a little mixed. But I am hearing more people, as the better quality video has finally been released, I'm hearing more good things. So that should be interesting.
Of course, always popular is Walking Dead. I mean,
Walking Dead, of course. Yeah. I have not heard much happening with Walking Dead this year. I know a lot of people were wanting to get into the panel. I know there was basically chaos whenever Kirkman was on the floor. So it was, there's always a big response for The Walking Dead, but I did not hear as much on the floor or with some of the things I checked online after I got back to the hotel.
Anything? Do you have any news on? I haven't heard much about the Stan Lee signing.
Stan Lee signing for The Unknowns, which is a new project. I don't have a lot of details on the project. I probably need to get more from Sean O'Reilly at Arcana, but that is a project that Arcana is involved with Stan Lee's POW Entertainment. I think it's still POW, yes. But it is new project, and it's involving pop music and animation and a lot of the storytelling that Stan's known for.
And what about, were you privy to anything on the Daredevil? I was looking at, they're talking about some of the aspects of that. Mind you, they're mum on a lot of what's happening, because some of these movies are still in the making, and
right.
They don't want to reveal too much, but
right.
They probably reveal a little more about Daredevil than maybe American Horror Story. But what are some, besides Daredevil?
I did not hear that much about Daredevil. I do know that the new Jessica Jones series with Kristen Ritter, they were showing clips of that, and of course it featured Luke Cage. It sounds like they are adapting the Alias series that Brian Michael Bendis did that introduced Jessica Jones. So I love that series when it first came out. It was a little more intense than your average Marvel comic at the time. So, I mean, it is going to be, if they're adapting super close, it's going to be a little grittier than maybe the Daredevil series was on Netflix. So you might want to watch it before you sit down with the kids to binge watch. But if by the looks of it, it's going to be Jessica Jones followed by the Luke Cage Power Man series. And I did not hear anything immediately about the Iron Fist series that would be connected as well. But that is one of the things when you're actually at the show, sometimes you don't find out what was happening at the show until you get back to the hotel, if you bring your computer and get online, or until you get home. because it is so massive.
Mm.
You and 150,000 of your closest friends.
So what are some surprises that you saw that you did not expect?
I did not expect to see Josh Whedon running around in an Ant-Man costume. That is one of the things that, as this has gotten so huge, is celebrities are having to resort to disguises to walk around the show floor. And I mean, there has always been an element of celebrity geeks at San Diego. Mark Hamill is a huge comic book fan. George Takei. George Takei? Okay, backtrack. Not Takei. Chekhov. He's written comics, and is a fan of the medium. But the last few years, it's like Seth Green still likes to walk around the show floor, but he tries to keep as low a profile as possible. Bryan Cranston last year was the infamous wearing the lifelike Bryan Cranston mask and looking through back issues, and it's like, wow, that's a really nice Breaking Bad costume. And it turns out under the Bryan Cranston mask, it was actually Bryan Cranston. Let's see, Adam Savage from Mythbusters was walking around in a 2001 A Space Odyssey spacesuit. And Josh Whedon was actually walking around in an Ant-Man costume. And because once they get spotted, they don't get to really take part anymore. They become part of the spectacle, but at least walking around in costume, trying to be inconspicuous, or as inconspicuous as you can in full costume, they get to just be fans again and enjoy the show, which is, you kind of feel bad for them, but at the same time, you kind of appreciate the fact that they're putting that much effort into just having fun and being a fan again.
So what was your biggest disappointment in this year's convention?
Actually, I was not that disappointed in the show this year. I got to, I had a great Thursday. One of the things, as a writer, you kind of feel like you're the forgotten man as far as comics go. Portfolio review areas are always looking for the artist. When you're in Artist Alley, the artists are the ones who are always going to get the big commissions and make the most money in Artist Alley, because no one is going to pay a writer $20 to diagram a sentence. But this year, there were a number of publishers and even Nickelodeon looking for writers. So that was good. Got to talk to a few publishers. Hopefully some freelance work will be coming out of it. But that was just a good show all around this year.
Awesome.
If there was a disappointment, it was just the insanity that was Saturday, trying to walk around, and it came a point where I just had to go, yeah, I think I'm just going to step outside for a few.
Well, in wrapping this up, why don't you let us know what's on the horizon in your own world? What comic books do you have on your plate?
Well, what's on the plate right now is, one of the nice things that happened out of talking with Arcana. They published 51 Delta, and they are focusing more on animation right now, or doing a lot more focus on animation. And we are sort of toying with the idea of working on an 51 Delta animated project. We're also, I have another project I'm doing with 51 Delta that we're trying to get some of the artwork straightened out on. Did I say 51 Delta? I'm doing it with Arcana, but it's a totally different project. And for my own Buy More Comics imprint, we are going to have, hopefully soon, the second issue of Night of the Gorilla. The first issue came out at C2E2 in Chicago. It's sort of 80s teen sex comedy meets 50s horror sci-fi with an episode of Bewitched thrown into the mix. A college student is accidentally transformed by his girlfriend into a giant gorilla. And so he's got to survive the homecoming weekend at the college until she gets back and can try to change him back. So we're having fun with that story. I'm also waiting on the color files to be completed for a book I'm doing for a UK publisher called Marcosia. The book is The It Girl set in 1929 Hollywood, where a serial killer has become obsessed with the actress Clara Bow. And we've got the inks completed. All that's left are the colors. And hopefully we'll have the graphic novel out at the first of the year.
Great. That one looks very interesting.
And after that, it's just seeing what I can pick up as far as freelance goes and try to have as much fun as I can writing comics.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today with me to talk about the highlights from Comic-Con. And
Glad to do it.
And hope to have you on our broadcast again in the future, talking about your next release.
Well, I'm more than happy to. And
thank you.
Right now, I'm looking forward to sleep. So.
Yeah, no doubt. Well,
thank you so much.
I'm going to stop the broadcast now, and you can you can catch up on resting up from your weekend there. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
For our movie talk, this is Debbie Ellickson and Sean Dulaney.